The day silence became power. The crimson paint splattered across Maya Chen's white sundress like spilled blood, each droplet marking another reason why Lincoln Valley High would never be the same again. The thick, acrylic mess dripped from the delicate fabric her grandmother had sewn by hand, pooling at her feet in the school commons while 150 students turned to stare. Jessica Rodriguez stood behind her with an empty paint bucket, her perfectly manicured fingers still gripping the handle, a triumphant smirk spreading across her glossy lips as she waited for the stammering apology that always came. The tears, the humiliation, the rush to the bathroom that would cement Maya's place at the bottom of Lincoln Valley's social food chain for another year. What Jessica didn't know was that Maya Chen had spent the last 4 years perfecting something far more devastating than any comeback. While other students scrolled through social media or gossiped in hallways, Maya had been training her mind to become a weapon more precise than any physical force. The girl who stumbled over simple words in casual conversation possessed a verbal arsenal that had already destroyed opponents twice her age in competition. But Jessica Rodriguez was about to discover that sometimes the quietest voices carry the most dangerous truths, and that pushing someone past their breaking point can unleash consequences that echo far beyond a single moment of cruelty. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Maya Chen had perfected the art of being invisible at Lincoln Valley High School, a skill that required more effort than most people realized. At 16, with shoulder-length black hair that perpetually fell across her face and dark eyes that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, she moved through the hallways like a shadow cast by someone more substantial. Her clothes were always modest, carefully chosen to avoid attention, neutral colors that helped her blend into the background of lockers and bulletin boards that lined the corridors of Lincoln Valley. The stutter had started when she was 7, appearing suddenly after a car accident that had left her hospitalized for 3 weeks with a severe concussion. The doctors assured her parents it would fade with time and therapy, but 9 years later, Maya still found herself trapped behind. Consonants that refused to cooperate, vowels that stretched into uncomfortable silences while listeners shifted impatiently. Simple words became obstacles, turning routine interactions into carefully planned negotiations with her own vocal cords. Dr. Lisa Chen, Maya's mother, was a prominent cardiac surgeon at Riverside General Hospital, someone who commanded instant respect from colleagues and patients alike. Her voice never wavered during 12-hour operations, never faltered when delivering life-altering news to families. James Chen, Maya's father, was a senior software engineer at a major tech company, presenting complex algorithms to boardrooms full of executives with the confidence that came from absolute expertise. Between them, they had created a daughter who possessed their intelligence and determination, but seemed cursed to struggle with the very thing they wielded so effortlessly, the power of clear, confident speech. The irony wasn't lost on Maya that her parents' genes had gifted her with a brilliant mind, trapped behind a broken delivery system. She excelled in written assignments, her essays earning praise from teachers who marveled at the sophistication of her thoughts and the elegance of her written voice. But when called upon to read aloud or participate in class discussions, Maya became a different person entirely, reduced to halting fragments and apologetic silences that made educators uncomfortable, and classmates either sympathetic or cruel. Lincoln Valley High School operated on a social hierarchy as rigid as any ancient caste system, with popularity determined by a complex algorithm of attractiveness, athletic ability, family wealth, and social media following. Maya occupied the lowest tier, not because she was particularly disliked, but because she was largely unnoticed. She ate lunch alone in the corner of the Commons, completed group projects as the silent member who did most of the work, and attended school events. As an observer rather than a participant, her daily routine had become a carefully choreographed dance of avoidance. She arrived at school early to claim a seat in the back of each classroom, positioned herself near exits to minimize the attention drawn by her movements, and timed her hallway transitions to avoid the heaviest foot traffic. Maya had mapped every quiet corner of Lincoln Valley, identified the teachers who called on students randomly versus those who accepted volunteers, and learned to read social situations well enough to disappear before conflict could find her. The paint incident had been building for weeks, though Maya hadn't recognized the signs until it was too late to change course. It started with Jessica Rodriguez's growing frustration over a chemistry project where Maya had been assigned as her lab partner through the cruel randomness of alphabetical seating. Jessica, accustomed to coasting through classes on charm and her father's generous donations to the school's athletic program, found herself paired with someone who actually expected her to contribute to their shared grade. Maya had approached the partnership with characteristic diligence, researching their assigned topic thoroughly and preparing detailed notes for their presentation on molecular bonding. When Jessica showed up to their first planning meeting 20 minutes late, scrolling through Instagram while Maya explained their project requirements, the dynamic was established immediately. Jessica would provide the presentation skills and social confidence, while Maya would handle the actual academic work. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. But Maya's stutter made even basic communication a challenge. Explaining complex scientific concepts while fighting through consonant clusters and vowel blockages frustrated both girls, though for different reasons. Maya felt the familiar shame of being unable to express ideas she understood perfectly, while Jessica grew impatient with what she perceived as intellectual inferiority disguised as a speech impediment. The breaking point came during their final planning session in the library, when Maya attempted to walk Jessica through their presentation outline. She had spent hours preparing note cards with simplified explanations, hoping to make the material accessible enough for her partner to present confidently. But when Maya began explaining the molecular structure diagrams, her stutter intensified under pressure, turning their meeting into an exercise in mutual frustration. Jessica's patience, never particularly robust, finally snapped when Maya got stuck on the word covalent, the C sound refusing to release, no matter how many times she tried to push through it. The silence stretched between them, punctuated only by Maya's quiet struggle and the soft whisper of pages turning at nearby tables. Other students began to notice, their conversations dropping to whispers as they watched Maya's obvious distress. The humiliation of that moment, combined with Jessica's barely concealed eye-rolling and theatrical sighs, planted the seed of what would eventually bloom into public cruelty. Jessica began making subtle comments about Maya's communication skills. To her friends, jokes that started as mild mockery but grew sharper with each retelling. She began referring to Maya as the broken record in private conversations, a reference that eventually evolved into more pointed observations about how some people weren't cut out for leadership roles or public speaking. What Jessica and her circle of influence didn't understand was that Maya Chen possessed skills they couldn't imagine, abilities honed in secret over years of dedicated practice. While they saw only the stuttering girl who struggled to order lunch in the cafeteria, Maya had been developing capabilities that would soon transform their understanding of power, confidence, and the true meaning of finding your voice. Jessica Rodriguez ruled Lincoln Valley High School with the calculated precision of someone who understood that popularity was a business requiring constant investment and strategic positioning. At 17, she possessed the kind of polished beauty that appeared effortless, but required significant maintenance, with honey blonde highlights that cost more than most students' monthly allowances and a wardrobe that served as a walking advertisement for her family's prosperity. Her father owned the largest construction company in Riverside County, a fact that translated into influence extending far beyond the school's brick walls and into the wallets of school board members, who approved building contracts. Jessica's power structure operated through carefully cultivated relationships and strategic alliances that would have impressed political operatives twice her age. She surrounded herself with individuals who brought specific value to her social enterprise, each friendship serving a purpose in maintaining her position at the apex of Lincoln Valley's teenage ecosystem. Her inner circle represented a diverse portfolio of influence, from athletes whose physical prowess provided protection and status, to wealthy students whose family connections opened doors, to social media-savvy individuals who managed her digital presence with professional efficiency. Brandon Mitchell served as Jessica's most visible accessory, a 6'2" basketball star whose college recruitment letters arrived weekly from Division I programs across the country. His athletic achievements provided Jessica with reflected glory, while his generally agreeable nature made him an ideal companion for public appearances at school events and social gatherings. Brandon possessed the kind of easy charm that made teachers overlook his academic shortcomings and parents invite him to family dinners, though his loyalty to Jessica stemmed more from social convenience than genuine affection. Ashley Thompson functioned as Jessica's digital strategist, managing social media campaigns that could elevate or destroy reputations with surgical precision. Her Instagram account boasted 15,000 followers, a number that translated into real influence among Lincoln Valley students who tracked social hierarchies through likes, comments, and story mentions. Ashley understood the unwritten rules of teenage digital warfare, knowing exactly which photos to post, which events to highlight, and which individuals to exclude from the carefully curated narrative of their social dominance. Connor Walsh completed the inner circle as the designated entertainer, someone whose quick wit and willingness to push boundaries provided the group with constant amusement while serving as a buffer between Jessica and any potential consequences of their actions. His role involved deflecting serious criticism through humor, testing the limits of what they could accomplish without facing real punishment, and ensuring that their cruelty always maintained plausible deniability through the shield of just joking around. Together, they formed a unit that had terrorized Lincoln Valley's social margins for 3 years, perfecting techniques of psychological warfare that left their targets isolated and questioning their own worth. Their methods were sophisticated, rarely crossing lines that would attract administrative attention, while consistently chipping away at their victims' confidence and social standing. They specialized in exclusion disguised as oversight, public humiliation framed as friendly teasing, and systematic campaigns designed to convince their targets that their suffering was somehow deserved. Maya had first appeared on their radar during freshman year, not because she posed any threat to their dominance, but because her obvious vulnerability made her an irresistible target for casual cruelty. Her stutter provided endless opportunities for entertainment, from deliberately asking her questions in public settings to recording her struggling responses for private amusement. They had perfected the art of making her participation in group activities so uncomfortable that she would voluntarily withdraw, creating a cycle of isolation that reinforced their narrative about her social inadequacy. The escalation pattern followed a predictable trajectory that Jessica had refined through years of practice. Initial contact involved seemingly innocent interactions designed to assess the target's resilience and identify specific vulnerabilities. Maya's obvious discomfort with public speaking made her an ideal candidate for their attention, providing multiple opportunities for humiliation disguised as normal classroom participation. They would volunteer her for presentations, suggest her name when teachers requested volunteers for reading assignments, and create situations where her stutter would be most prominently displayed. As Maya's discomfort became more apparent, Jessica's group began incorporating her struggles into their daily entertainment routine. They would position themselves strategically during her presentations, whispering comments just loud enough for her to hear, but quiet enough to avoid teacher detection. Their phones would appear whenever Maya faced speaking challenges, creating a permanent record of her most vulnerable moments for later review and sharing among their extended social network. The psychological component of their campaign proved even more devastating than the public humiliation. Jessica understood that sustained cruelty required making the victim complicit in their own suffering, convincing them that their mistreatment was somehow natural or deserved. She began spreading subtle rumors about Maya's family background, suggesting that her parents' success was built on questionable foundations and that Maya's academic achievements came from cheating rather than genuine ability. These whispered campaigns created an atmosphere of suspicion around Maya that extended beyond Jessica's immediate circle. Teachers began questioning whether Maya's written work was truly her own, given the stark contrast between her eloquent essays and her halting verbal communication. Students started viewing her academic success with skepticism, wondering how someone who struggled to complete basic sentences could produce such sophisticated analysis. The isolation became self-reinforcing as Maya withdrew further from social interaction to avoid additional humiliation. Her lunch periods moved from shared tables to solitary corners. Her participation in extracurricular activities dwindled to nothing, and her responses to casual greetings became so brief that many students stopped acknowledging her presence entirely. Jessica's strategy of making Maya invisible to everyone, except when she needed a target for entertainment, had succeeded beyond her wildest expectations. What neither Jessica nor her followers understood was that Maya's withdrawal from social activities had created space for pursuits they couldn't imagine. While they spent their afternoon shopping, gossiping, and documenting their social superiority for digital consumption, Maya had discovered something that would eventually transform their understanding of power and communication. Her parents, concerned about their daughter's growing isolation and declining self-confidence, had enrolled her in speech therapy sessions that quickly evolved into something much more significant. Mr. David Park had recognized something in Maya that went beyond her obvious struggles with verbal communication. A former debate champion himself, who had transitioned into education after a successful career in corporate law, he saw in Maya's written work and analytical thinking the raw materials of exceptional oratory skills. Her stutter, he explained, was a mechanical issue that could be addressed through practice and technique. But her mind possessed the kind of strategic intelligence that separated good speakers from truly devastating ones. The speech therapy sessions gradually expanded into informal debate coaching, as Mr. Park introduced Maya to rhetorical techniques and logical argument structures that played to her analytical strengths. He taught her that powerful communication was less about perfect articulation and more about understanding how to construct arguments that could dismantle opposition through superior logic and emotional intelligence. Maya discovered that when she focused on defending ideas she cared about rather than simply avoiding embarrassment, her stutter became manageable and sometimes disappeared entirely. Their sessions moved from the clinical environment of the speech therapy office to the debate practice room, where Maya began working with advanced techniques of persuasion and public speaking. Mr. Park introduced her to classical rhetoric, modern debate strategies, and the psychological principles that governed how audiences responded to different speaking styles. Maya absorbed these lessons with the intensity of someone who had spent years feeling powerless, finally finding tools that could transform her greatest weakness into an unexpected strength. The transformation was gradual but profound. Maya's confidence in controlled environments began growing as she mastered the technical aspects of formal debate and learned to channel her nervous energy into focused intellectual aggression. Mr. Park arranged for her to participate in regional competitions under a pseudonym, allowing her to develop her skills without the social complications that would arise if her classmates discovered her hidden abilities. At these competitions, Maya encountered opponents who knew nothing about her reputation at Lincoln Valley, who judged her solely on her ability to construct and defend complex arguments under pressure. For the first time in years, she experienced the satisfaction of intellectual victory, the rush of dismantling carefully prepared positions through superior research and strategic thinking. Her stutter, which seemed insurmountable in casual conversation, became almost non-existent when she was focused on the technical demands of formal debate. Jessica's group remained completely unaware of Maya's parallel development, continuing to view her through the lens of their established narrative about social hierarchies and personal worth. They saw only the girl who stumbled through presentations and ate lunch alone, never imagining that she was spending her evenings mastering techniques that could reduce their own verbal abilities to fumbling inadequacy. Their confidence in their social dominance blinded them to the possibility that power could be cultivated in forms they didn't recognize or respect. The chemistry project partnership had been the catalyst that would eventually bring these two worlds into collision, forcing Maya to interact directly with Jessica in a context where her academic abilities couldn't be ignored or dismissed. Jessica's growing frustration with having to rely on someone she considered socially inferior created the psychological pressure that would eventually push their conflict beyond the realm of casual cruelty into something much more dangerous for everyone involved. The degradation of their working relationship accelerated after the library incident, when Maya's struggle with the word covalent had provided Jessica with ammunition for weeks of private mockery among her social circle. What began as frustrated complaints about being paired with the stuttering girl evolved into elaborate stories about Maya's supposed incompetence, each retelling adding new details about her alleged inability to contribute meaningfully to their shared assignment. Jessica's natural talent for narrative manipulation transformed a single moment of vulnerability into a comprehensive character assassination that spread through Lincoln Valley's social networks like digital wildfire. Ashley Thompson proved particularly adept at weaponizing the incident for social media consumption, creating carefully crafted posts that referenced Maya's struggles without explicitly naming her, using coded language that their followers understood perfectly while maintaining plausible deniability. Her Instagram stories featured subtle mockery disguised as educational content, with captions like, "When your lab partner can't even pronounce basic chemistry terms," accompanied by eye-rolling emojis and strategic hashtags that ensured maximum visibility among their target demographic. The campaign's sophistication reflected years of practice in character destruction, with each member of Jessica's circle contributing their specialized skills to the coordinated assault on Maya's reputation. Brandon's role involved casual mentions during his interactions with other athletes, spreading the narrative that Maya was academically fraudulent and socially awkward beyond redemption. His influence among the school's athletic elite ensured that the story reached students who had never interacted with Maya directly, creating a widespread perception of incompetence that extended far beyond Jessica's immediate social sphere. Connor Walsh handled the entertainment component, developing a repertoire of Maya-inspired jokes that he deployed strategically during lunch periods and between classes. His performances never mentioned Maya by name, but included unmistakable references to stuttering, academic pretension, and social inadequacy that left no doubt about their target. Connor's ability to make cruelty seem clever and socially acceptable provided the group with a veneer of sophistication that distinguished their bullying from cruder forms of harassment practiced by less refined tormentors. The psychological warfare extended into Maya's academic environment as Jessica began undermining her classroom participation through strategic interventions designed to maximize embarrassment. She would ask Maya seemingly innocent questions during group discussions, knowing that the pressure to respond quickly would intensify her stutter and create opportunities for public humiliation. These attacks were timed precisely to occur when teachers were momentarily distracted or when classroom dynamics made intervention unlikely. Jessica's understanding of institutional dynamics proved particularly valuable in avoiding consequences for her escalating campaign. She recognized that teachers at Lincoln Valley faced overwhelming pressure to maintain positive relationships with influential families, creating an environment where complaints about students like herself would be met with skepticism and reluctance to pursue disciplinary action. Her father's construction company had renovated the school's athletic facilities, built the new library wing, and contributed substantially to the scholarship fund that allowed administrators to attract better teaching talent. This economic leverage translated into practical immunity from serious consequences, allowing Jessica to push boundaries that would have resulted in suspension or expulsion for students from less privileged backgrounds. Teachers who witnessed her subtle cruelties found themselves in the uncomfortable position of choosing between protecting vulnerable students and maintaining the financial relationships that kept their programs funded and their jobs secure. The unspoken understanding that complaints about Jessica could jeopardize their professional security created a culture of willful blindness that enabled her behavior to escalate without meaningful intervention. Maya's isolation deepened as Jessica's campaign achieved its intended effect of turning her into a social pariah whose presence made other students uncomfortable. The few classmates who might have shown sympathy found themselves reluctant to associate with someone who had become a lightning rod for negative attention, fearing that defending Maya would make them targets for similar treatment. The mathematics of teenage social survival dictated that supporting the obviously losing side in a conflict with someone as powerful as Jessica represented an unacceptable risk to their own standing. The academic consequences proved equally devastating as teachers began questioning Maya's capabilities despite her consistently excellent written work. The contrast between her articulate essays and her halting verbal communication created suspicion about the authenticity of her achievements, with some educators wondering privately whether her parents were providing inappropriate assistance with assignments. These doubts affected grading decisions and recommendation letters, creating tangible obstacles to Maya's academic future that extended far beyond the immediate social humiliation. Maya's response to this systematic destruction of her reputation involved retreating further into the world of competitive debate, where her growing skills provided relief from the daily humiliation of high school social dynamics. Mr. Park had introduced her to regional tournament circuits where she could compete under assumed names, allowing her to develop confidence and technical proficiency without risking exposure to her Lincoln Valley tormentors. These competitions became Maya's secret identity, a parallel existence where she could experience success and respect from peers who judged her solely on intellectual merit. The debate tournaments revealed capabilities that would have shocked anyone familiar with Maya's school persona, as she systematically dismantled opponents with arguments that combined sophisticated research with devastating logical precision. Her stutter, which seemed insurmountable in casual conversation, disappeared entirely when she focused on the technical demands of formal argumentation. The structured environment of competitive debate provided the framework she needed to channel her analytical intelligence into verbal dominance that left opponents scrambling for coherent responses. Mr. Park documented her progress meticulously, recognizing that Maya possessed the rare combination of intellectual firepower and emotional investment that produced truly exceptional debaters. Her personal experience with powerlessness and humiliation added emotional depth to her arguments that purely academic debaters couldn't match, while her analytical mind crafted logical structures that were nearly impossible to challenge effectively. The synthesis of personal pain and intellectual precision created a speaking style that was both devastating and deeply compelling. The tournaments also provided Maya with exposure to advanced rhetorical techniques that went far beyond the basics persuasion skills taught in standard speech classes. She learned to identify and exploit logical fallacies in real time, to construct emotional appeals that could sway audiences without sacrificing intellectual integrity, and to deliver character assassinations that appeared reasonable and measured while utterly destroying their target's credibility. These skills were developing rapidly as Maya spent increasing amounts of time preparing for competitions that offered the only positive feedback she received from any aspect of her life. Her research methods became increasingly sophisticated as she learned to anticipate opponents' arguments and prepare counter-responses that could neutralize even well-prepared challenges to her positions. Maya discovered that superior preparation could overcome almost any disadvantage in natural charisma or speaking ability, allowing her to compete successfully against opponents who possessed more natural verbal gifts but less intellectual rigor. The countless hours she spent researching complex topics and crafting arguments began paying dividends as she won increasingly prestigious tournaments. The competitive success provided Maya with validation that had been absent from every other aspect of her teenage experience, creating a feedback loop that motivated even more intensive preparation and skill development. She began studying advanced rhetoric texts, analyzing famous speeches for technique and structure, and practicing delivery methods that could maximize the impact of her carefully constructed arguments. The girl who couldn't order lunch without stammering was becoming a verbal assassin, capable of reducing experienced debaters to confused silence. Jessica remained completely unaware of this parallel development, continuing to view Maya through the lens of their established power dynamic while planning the escalation that would ultimately bring their conflict to its inevitable conclusion. Her confidence in Maya's helplessness and social isolation had grown so complete that she began considering more dramatic demonstrations of dominance, seeking ways to cement her victory through public humiliation that would be remembered long after their graduation from Lincoln Valley. The planning for Maya's ultimate destruction began during one of Jessica's regular strategy sessions with her inner circle, informal meetings disguised as social gatherings where they coordinated their various campaigns against students who had attracted their negative attention. Maya had become their primary project, the target that received the most planning and resources as Jessica sought to create a definitive demonstration of the consequences that awaited anyone who failed to recognize their proper place in Lincoln Valley's social hierarchy. Ashley suggested documenting the next phase of their campaign more extensively, creating content that could be shared beyond their immediate circle to establish Jessica's reputation as someone capable of destroying social rivals with creative efficiency. The idea of going viral through cruelty appealed to Jessica's ambition while providing Ashley with content that could boost her own social media metrics through association with dramatic teenage conflict. Brandon's contribution involved identifying the optimal location and timing for their planned escalation, using his knowledge of school schedules and administrative patterns to ensure maximum exposure while minimizing the risk of immediate intervention. His athletic schedule gave him insights into when certain areas of the campus would be crowded with students, but relatively free of faculty supervision, creating windows of opportunity for dramatic confrontations. Connor's role involved developing the psychological components of their attack, crafting verbal strategies designed to maximize Maya's humiliation, while maintaining the pretense that their actions were justified responses to her alleged social transgressions. His understanding of how to make cruelty appear reasonable and proportionate would prove crucial in managing the narrative aftermath of whatever escalation they decided to pursue. The dress incident emerged from this collaborative planning process as the perfect synthesis of their individual talents and Maya's specific vulnerabilities. Jessica had noticed Maya's attachment to a particular white sundress that she wore to important school events, a garment that stood out from her usual neutral wardrobe and seemed to represent her attempts to participate more fully in Lincoln Valley's social life. The dress had been handmade by Maya's grandmother, a detail that Jessica had overheard during a phone conversation that Maya thought was private, but had been carefully monitored for intelligence-gathering purposes. The significance of the dress extended far beyond its aesthetic appeal, representing one of the few connections Maya maintained to her extended family and cultural heritage. Her grandmother, who lived in a retirement community 3 hours away, had spent months creating the garment as a surprise for Maya's 16th birthday, incorporating traditional embroidery techniques that had been passed down through generations of women in their family. The dress served as a tangible link to stories and traditions that Maya's parents, in their focus on assimilation and professional success, had sometimes neglected to preserve. Maya wore the dress sparingly, reserving it for occasions when she wanted to feel connected to something larger than her daily struggles at Lincoln Valley. School presentations that mattered to her, award ceremonies where she received academic recognition, and the rare social events she attended all became opportunities to honor her grandmother's gift, while drawing strength from the love and craftsmanship woven into every stitch. The dress made her feel visible in ways that were positive rather than humiliating, transforming her from the invisible girl into someone worthy of attention and respect. Jessica's recognition of the dress's emotional significance made it an irresistible target for the kind of psychological warfare she had perfected over years of practice. Destroying something that held deep personal meaning would achieve multiple objectives simultaneously, demonstrating her power to reach into the most private aspects of her victim's life while creating trauma that would extend far beyond the immediate incident. The public destruction of something precious would serve as a warning to other potential challengers while providing content for social media documentation that could immortalize Maya's humiliation. The planning process revealed the sophisticated nature of Jessica's approach to systematic cruelty, as she considered variables that would maximize impact while minimizing personal consequences. The timing needed to ensure maximum student witnesses while avoiding immediate administrative intervention. The method of destruction had to be dramatic enough for compelling documentation, but not so extreme as to trigger serious disciplinary action, and the narrative framing required careful construction to maintain plausible deniability about malicious intent. Ashley's expertise in social media strategy proved crucial in developing the documentation plan, as she understood how to create content that would achieve viral potential while managing legal and ethical boundaries. Her experience with teenage digital culture informed decisions about camera angles, hashtag strategies, and platform-specific optimizations that could transform a single incident into sustained online attention. The prospect of creating content that might reach audiences beyond Lincoln Valley added an element of ambition to their cruelty that elevated it from local bullying to potential internet fame. Brandon's athletic schedule provided intelligence about when the Commons area would be crowded with students, but relatively free of faculty supervision, creating optimal conditions for their planned confrontation. His understanding of how news traveled through different social groups helped them identify the perfect moment when maximum witnesses would be present to observe Maya's destruction, while ensuring that sympathetic adults would be elsewhere when intervention might prevent their plan from reaching completion. Connor's psychological insights guided the development of justification narratives that would make their actions appear reasonable to observers who might otherwise intervene on Maya's behalf. His understanding of teenage social dynamics helped craft explanations that would frame their attack as legitimate response to Maya's alleged social transgressions, creating a veneer of justice that could prevent their cruelty from being recognized as unprovoked aggression. The acquisition of paint required careful consideration of symbolic impact and practical constraints, as they needed a substance that would create dramatic visual destruction while avoiding materials that might result in serious criminal charges. Red paint emerged as the optimal choice, providing blood-like symbolism that would maximize psychological trauma while remaining within the boundaries of property damage rather than assault. The theatrical quality of paint destruction would also create compelling visual content for social media documentation. Maya remained completely unaware of the conspiracy developing around her as she continued her double life of academic submission at school and competitive excellence in debate tournaments. Her latest tournament victory had been particularly satisfying, as she had defeated a senior from a prestigious private school whose preparation and resources far exceeded anything available to students from public institutions. The victory validated months of independent research and practice, while providing evidence that her intellectual abilities could triumph over advantages of wealth and institutional support. Mr. Park had been documenting Maya's progress with increasing excitement, recognizing that her combination of analytical intelligence and emotional investment was producing results that exceeded his most optimistic expectations. Her tournament performances were attracting attention from college recruiters who specialized in identifying exceptional debate talent, creating opportunities for scholarship consideration that could transform her educational future. The contrast between her potential academic trajectory and her current social isolation at Lincoln Valley made her situation particularly poignant for educators who understood both her capabilities and her daily struggles. The preparation for regional championships had intensified as Maya worked to master advanced argumentation techniques that could give her competitive advantages against opponents from better-funded programs. Her research methodology had evolved to rival graduate-level academic standards as she learned to synthesize complex information from multiple sources into coherent arguments that could withstand sophisticated challenges. The intellectual rigor required for elite competition was providing Maya with cognitive tools that would prove devastatingly effective in contexts far removed from formal debate. Her confidence in controlled environments continued growing as she mastered the technical aspects of rhetorical combat, learning to identify weaknesses in opponents' arguments while constructing unassailable logical frameworks for her own positions. The structured nature of competitive debate provided Maya with clear rules and objective standards that eliminated the social variables that made casual interactions so challenging. In tournament settings, success depended entirely on preparation, intelligence, and execution, rather than the arbitrary social factors that determined status at Lincoln Valley. The emotional investment Maya brought to her debate preparation reflected years of accumulated frustration and powerlessness that she was finally learning to channel into productive aggression. Her arguments carried passion that purely academic debaters couldn't match, while her analytical training ensured that emotion enhanced rather than undermined her logical precision. The synthesis of intellectual rigor and personal investment was creating a speaking style that judges described as both compelling and formidable. Jessica's group had settled on the Monday morning of homecoming week for their planned escalation, recognizing that the heightened social atmosphere would provide optimal conditions for maximum impact. The commons area would be crowded with students, discussing weekend plans and homecoming preparations, creating an audience that would ensure wide distribution of whatever humiliation they chose to inflict. The timing also coincided with Maya's presentation of their chemistry project, adding academic pressure that would make her more vulnerable to additional stress. The final planning session revealed the extent to which their conspiracy had evolved, beyond casual cruelty into something approaching coordinated warfare. Each member of Jessica's circle had specific responsibilities for ensuring the success of their operation, from Ashley's documentation strategy to Brandon's crowd management and Connor's narrative control. The level of preparation they devoted to destroying Maya's emotional well-being demonstrated both their commitment to social dominance and their recognition that she represented a challenge to their established order. Maya's decision to wear the white sundress on the morning of their chemistry presentation reflected her hope that the important academic milestone might provide an opportunity for positive recognition that could begin repairing her damaged reputation. She had spent the weekend perfecting their presentation materials, creating visual aids that would allow Jessica to deliver their findings without requiring deep understanding of the underlying concepts. The dress represented Maya's attempt to present herself as someone deserving of respect and consideration, rather than the invisible target she had become. The irony of Maya's careful preparation for academic success while remaining completely unaware of the social destruction being planned around her highlighted the disconnect between intellectual achievement and teenage social dynamics. Her focus on substantive accomplishments blinded her to the reality that her tormentors were motivated by power rather than academic competition, making her vulnerable to attacks that had nothing to do with educational merit or personal character. The morning of the incident began with Maya arriving at school early to set up their presentation materials in the chemistry classroom, ensuring that everything would be ready for Jessica's arrival and their joint presentation to the class. Her nervous energy about the academic performance combined with excitement about wearing her grandmother's dress created a sense of optimism that had been absent from her school experience for months. The possibility that successful completion of their project might earn Jessica's respect and potentially improve their working relationship represented hope that Maya had been afraid to acknowledge. Jessica's arrival at school with her inner circle and carefully concealed container of red paint marked the beginning of an operation that would transform both their lives in ways that none of the participants could fully anticipate. The confidence that came from months of successful psychological warfare had convinced Jessica that Maya would respond to escalation with the same helpless submission she had shown to previous attacks, making the morning seem like a celebration of inevitable victory, rather than the dangerous miscalculation it would prove to be. The commons area buzzed with typical Monday morning energy as students gathered in clusters, discussing weekend activities and homecoming preparations. Maya sat alone at her usual corner table, reviewing note cards for their chemistry presentation, while unconsciously smoothing the fabric of her grandmother's dress. The white sundress caught the morning light streaming through the skylights, making her more visible than usual among the sea of students in their typical dark clothing choices. She appeared serene and focused, completely unaware that she had been marked for public destruction. Jessica approached with theatrical confidence, her three accomplices flanking her in formation that had been practiced during their weekend planning sessions. Ashley held her phone at the optimal angle for capturing the incident while maintaining plausible deniability about intentional documentation. Brandon positioned himself to control crowd dynamics and prevent potential interference from sympathetic bystanders. Connor prepared his repertoire of jokes and commentary that would frame their attack as justified entertainment rather than malicious cruelty. The paint bucket materialized from Ashley's oversized designer bag with practiced smoothness, its red contents gleaming like liquid violence in the fluorescent lighting. Jessica's voice carried across the commons with amplified sweetness as she called Maya's name, ensuring that maximum witnesses would be paying attention when the devastation commenced. The false friendliness in her tone made nearby students look up from their conversations, sensing that something significant was about to unfold. Maya looked up from her notes with genuine surprise, unaccustomed to being addressed directly by Jessica outside their forced academic collaboration. The hope in her eyes reflected her persistent belief that academic success might eventually earn her acceptance and respect from her social superiors. She stood slowly, clutching her presentation materials while offering a tentative smile that made the impending cruelty even more devastating for the observers who would remember this moment for years afterward. The paint arced through the air in slow motion, its crimson trajectory creating a bridge between Jessica's malicious intent and Maya's complete vulnerability. The liquid struck the white fabric with violent precision, spreading across the handmade embroidery like spilled blood across fresh snow. Gasps echoed through the commons as students recognized the magnitude of destruction they were witnessing, the deliberate annihilation of something beautiful and irreplaceable for the sake of social dominance. Maya's hands moved instinctively to the ruined fabric, her fingers tracing the paint-soaked embroidery that represented months of her grandmother's careful work and generations of family tradition. The silence that followed the impact stretched for eternities as every student in the commons held their breath, waiting to see whether Maya would collapse into the tears and apologies that had defined her responses to previous attacks. Jessica's triumphant expression began shifting toward uncertainty as the expected breakdown failed to materialize. Instead of crumbling, Maya straightened to her full height with movements that seemed to draw power from the destruction around her. The paint dripping from her dress created dramatic visual punctuation as she raised her eyes to meet Jessica's gaze directly for the first time in their 3-year conflict. The transformation was immediate and unmistakable. As years of accumulated rage and suppressed eloquence crystallized into focused purpose that made the air itself feel electric with potential energy. When Maya spoke, her voice carried none of the hesitation and stammering that had characterized her speech for years. At Lincoln Valley, the words emerged with crystalline clarity and devastating precision, each syllable crafted for maximum psychological impact through techniques she had mastered in countless debate tournaments. Her opening statement cut through the commons like a blade, silencing the murmur of student conversations and commanding absolute attention from everyone within hearing range. She began by deconstructing Jessica's character with surgical precision, identifying and exposing the insecurities and moral failures that drove her need to destroy others for social validation. Her analysis was methodical and comprehensive, revealing intimate knowledge of Jessica's psychological weaknesses while demonstrating intellectual superiority that made Jessica's previous dominance appear shallow and temporary. The clinical detachment in Maya's voice made her words even more devastating than emotional accusations would have been. The deconstruction expanded to include Jessica's entire social circle, as Maya systematically dismantled their individual contributions to the toxic culture they had created at Lincoln Valley. She exposed Ashley's desperate need for digital validation, Brandon's intellectual mediocrity masked by athletic achievement, and Connor's cowardice disguised as humor. Each revelation hit its target with precision that demonstrated deep understanding of human psychology and strategic thinking that her opponents had never suspected she possessed. Maya's rhetorical arsenal included evidence and documentation that shocked everyone present, as she revealed her knowledge of their private conversations, their academic dishonesty, and their systematic campaigns against multiple vulnerable students over the years. Her preparation was comprehensive and devastating, suggesting that she had been building a case against them with the thoroughness of a prosecutor preparing for trial. The breadth of her knowledge made it clear that their previous perception of her as powerless and unaware had been completely mistaken. The performance lasted exactly 45 seconds, during which Maya delivered a verbal annihilation so complete and devastating that it left her opponents speechless and emotionally shattered. When she finished, the Commons remained in absolute silence as students processed what they had witnessed. Jessica stood frozen with paint buckets still in hand, her face reflecting the gradual realization that she had awakened something far more dangerous than she had ever imagined possible. Maya gathered her presentation materials with calm dignity, her movements deliberate and controlled as she prepared to leave the scene of her transformation. She paused only to address the crowd of witnesses, delivering a final statement about the consequences of mistaking quiet strength for weakness and the dangers of underestimating people based on surface appearances. Her words carried the authority of someone who had just demonstrated absolute intellectual dominance in the most public way possible. The aftermath was swift and decisive, as video of Maya's verbal destruction spread through social media with viral velocity that exceeded Ashley's most optimistic projections for their planned humiliation content. Instead of documenting Maya's breakdown, they had captured their own complete annihilation by someone they had dismissed as powerless. The irony was lost on no one, and the reversal became a cautionary tale about the dangers of systematic cruelty and the power of underestimated intelligence. Jessica's social empire collapsed within hours, as students who had feared her for years realized that her power had been built on illusion rather than substance. Maya's demonstration had revealed the intellectual poverty behind their social dominance, while providing a template for how seemingly powerless individuals could reclaim their dignity through superior preparation and strategic thinking. Lincoln Valley High School would never be the same, and Maya Chen had found her voice in the most dramatic way possible. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.